What is going on, 12 subscribers? Welcome to probably my first serious video, and this is going to be one on running, some tips for some new runners. Hopefully you can gain some insight from this. So my first tip for new runners is to not worry about how fast you're going. More times than not, I always hear people say how, oh, I could never run a 5K, or I could never run a half marathon or a full marathon or whatever it might be. And you see people running and they go out and they run as fast as they possibly can. And it really depends on what your goal is. If your goal is to be a sprinter, yeah, go out and run as fast as you can. But if you're trying to build up your mileage, build up your aerobic base, you're going to have to slow things down a bit. And in general, if you're going out for a run in the neighborhood and you're just trying to be a little active, trying to burn off some calories, try to just feel a little better about yourself, it really doesn't matter if you're running an 8-minute mile, a 4-minute mile, a 16-minute mile. It doesn't really matter. As long as you're getting outside and you're getting after it, you will make progress. You know, so if you're in the neighborhood and someone's speeding by past you, I know it's like human nature to get a little upset that they like zoomed on past you, but you know what? Wish them well, hope that they have a nice run, and focus on your game plan of steadily building up. That brings me into point number 2, which is essentially you don't have to run the entire time. This is a funny story. It's actually my first ultra marathon. I just kind of went out and I really had no game plan. I kind of just wanted to finish it. It was on like a single track, and there were 2 ladies who were doing the run walk strategy, and they had this timer on their phone. I think it was maybe 2 minutes of running and 30 seconds of walking, or whatever it may have been. And it's funny because it was on a single track, so they kept going ahead of me, I'll go ahead of them, and it got really annoying over the course of like 6 or 7 hours. And they ended up beating me by about 30 minutes because I ended up going out too fast and I burnt out, whereas they were patient and they did the run walk strategy for over, I think, about 35 miles or so. So that's one thing that a lot of people utilize. And I'll get into heart rate based training and the intensity with which you can run in some other videos. But that's a strategy that you can use, kind of like a run walk strategy. And I know a lot of professional runners do that on very hot days, or if they're going up steep inclines, in order to keep things nice and steady and kind of just finish out the duration of run. Don't be afraid if you have to walk a little bit. Any progress is great progress. Also, walking during a race can help you vary up your muscle groups. If you're going out for a longer period of time, typically when you see someone running, they're going to use the same exact muscle groups, and it's going to be a lot of pounding on those muscles, a lot of pounding on the joints. So even walking for 20 or 30 seconds at a time can really help. And that brings me on to point number 3, is wear comfortable clothing. So it doesn't matter if you're just trying to go out for a nice leisurely run to try to incorporate it a little more, or if you're going to try to train for a bigger race. One huge thing I would say is invest in good shoes. More times than not, I see people wearing shoes which really won't help them with running, whether it's just like a regular tennis shoe or skate shoes, or shoes that are just tied really, really tight. My recommendation for new runners is to go to a local running store, support your local businesses, and have someone there look at your gait. Typically what they'll do is they'll have you walk out and walk back, and they'll look at your gait pattern. They can tell if you walk a little bit more on the insides of your feet versus the outside of your feet, and you can tell them what your goals are if you're trying to, you know, run a 5K or run an ultra marathon, and how long you're going to be out there for, and they can give you an idea of what best shoes to buy. Also, I know Runner's World typically has some really great flow charts that are nicely done for what shoes you can buy. And typically, if you don't want to spend top dollar on some nice running shoes, you can just go on Amazon and buy like the previous year's model, which are always like half off. So first things first is get some good running shoes, because you will thank me later. It is a huge, huge, huge cornerstone. And I'll do a video on running shoes, but even after 300 to 500 miles in those shoes, you should probably just use them for walking at that point and invest in new shoes. So the health of your muscles and your joints are of utmost importance, so it all starts with good running shoes. Next, point number 4, don't pull a Michael Scott. You don't need to carb load before a huge race or even a training run. This is something I'm sure that a lot of runners have mistakenly done in the past, whether they eat a little too close to a training run, or they eat a little too close to a race, or they even eat a little too much. Typically, if you eat within about an hour or 2 before, something relatively light, like maybe a bagel with some peanut butter, they always say, or just having like a good, like an apple and then a protein source, maybe some Greek yogurt, some chicken, or whatever you're into, just something relatively light that'll supplement the activity that you're going to be doing. So if you know you're going to go out and run for 2 miles, typically with like 2 miles, you might burn off 200 calories or something. You don't need a huge meal to supplement that 2 mile run. So whatever it is you're going to do, make sure it supplements the activity that you're going to do. So even if you're going to go out and run a 20-mile long run in the neighborhood, maybe the night before you should eat a little more carbs, and maybe a couple hours before you should have a bagel or two. And on the way, you'll fuel up. But in general, you don't need to be eating a whole lot of food, because that can upset your stomach. A lot of runners have GI issues. Just really play around and see what works best for you. And that brings me into point number 5, and that is to really have an open mind, have no set expectations. I think this is probably the most important one of them all, is that with anything in life, usually goals aren't achieved from point A to point B in a very linear fashion. Typically there's going to be a lot of self-doubt, a lot of confusion, a lot of frustration. Sometimes you fall down, sometimes you feel like you're going backwards. So whether you want to run your first marathon, you kind of just want to start running, typically just have an open mind. What I've always found is that even if you don't really feel like running and you know you have to run based on a schedule, typically you'll come back to the house feeling much better than when you left. And with running, what's really, really great is that there's really no finish line. Obviously, there's a finish line in a race, but typically, as a runner, you can always get a little more athletic, a little faster. You can go a little further. You can meet some amazing people, and the running community is very, very open to just supporting one another. And just going with an open mind. If you're not feeling great one day and you kind of want to walk it, maybe you'll end up PRing that day. Who knows? But have an open mind. Just have fun with it. And I hope those 5 tips helped. I'm going to look forward to hopefully putting out more videos, maybe a couple times a week. I'm a big time fan of running, and I love the running community. Hopefully you took something from this. So check back later in the week for some other running related videos, and get outside and run. The weather's absolutely beautiful.